Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to MindShifters Radio, based on the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? I'm Michael Ryce, your host. Jeannie will be on the line in just a moment or two. If you're waiting to get into the chat room, we're experiencing, as usual, on occasion, on the road, some technical difficulties. And if you're holding on the phone, Jeannie will be able to tap you in just a moment. And our work on this wonderful day in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is where we're located in our journey on the road, delivering the tools of forgiveness around the planet. We'll actually be in Pahrump, Nevada, if you happen to be in this territory, starting on Sunday, doing a 4-day free series of workshops at a place called Universal Wisdom Center. And so Sunday from 1 to 4:30, we'll do Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Monday evening, we'll do 7 to 9:30, Healing Through Relationships. Tuesday evening, The Circle of Life and How to Play It. And Wednesday evening, Codependence to Interdependence. So that will be our workshop series here in Pahrump, Nevada, starting on Sunday. And besides that, our work is around the idea of forgiveness from the Aramaic sense. And, of course, you've heard me say this before, but I'll probably say it in just about every show because we have new listeners who haven't heard us speak about the Aramaic forgiveness process. But as opposed to the Greek idea of I'm going to let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me, the Aramaic idea was I'm going to go inside me and change what's happening there. And so how to get past the belief that everybody else is responsible for what's happening inside of you, and recognizing that, you know, if you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the only one that was there every time. It's about you, and it's all changeable. And once you realize that it's all changeable, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to tolerate any form of hostility, fear, emotional turmoil, and pain. It's time for us as human beings to dump those things, to get rid of them, and they can be removed. But they can't be removed as long as you're blaming somebody else for it. And, of course, our culture says, you made me angry, you made me sad, you made me afraid. I'll invite you to notice that every time you've been angry, sad, or afraid, you're the one who's been there. It is the output of your mind that creates angry, sad, or afraid, and it's changeable. And it's changeable through the process of internal forgiveness. How you go inside yourself and change the content of your own mind, of your own physiology. You change the chemical state of your cellular structure as you begin to forgive and change what happens inside of you. So we're here to work with those tools. Jeannie, are you with us yet?
I am, and we've also We've got David and Terry and Tim all listening online. We don't have anything going on in the chat room yet, so call-in number is 646-200-4169. If you have a question, call in.
Delighted. Good morning, David and Terry and Tim. How are you gentlemen this morning?
All at one time. I'm doing fabulous, Michael. Just showing the space here at Heartland, getting the rowboats out. The water is continuously coming down here. It's lots and lots and lots of water. And Ingra and Nightshade have just been fabulous and supportive. They're listening in as well. They're with Terry and listening in. And it's doing fabulous today.
Cool. And Terry, how do you be this morning? Or I guess it's afternoon there, pardon me.
Yeah, doing really well. Processing through some different understandings and having a lot of fun with some new folks here and David and exploring the work. So that's what's going on.
Our friends from Acorn are still there?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, how go the worksheets, ladies?
We have yet to start or complete one. We've been getting the crash course, though, this morning.
Awesome. Well, you're blessed, and so are we. Mm-hmm. Delighted to be sharing it with you. I hope that we share it in a way that comes across with enough clarity that in understanding the process, you can take it back home with you and put it to work in your community. That would be fabulous. And our highest vision is that we are empowered to take these tools and this teaching to every mind, heart, and being on the planet, that we can actually begin to remove all traces of hostility and fear from humanity, which, of course, people say, well, that's a utopian vision. That's not possible. And you're right. Under the standard Greek thought, which has governed our culture, you made me angry, you made me sad, you made me afraid. Obviously, you have to change in order for me to get rid of my angry, sad, or afraid. When you go to the Aramaic culture, what you realize is if you want to get rid of angry, sad, or afraid, it's got nothing to do with anybody else. Nobody else needs to change. You can stand in front of exactly the same behaviors that yesterday brought up angry, fear, and afraid, and instead of being in those states, you can change your mind. And so it's a delight to have you ladies there and to be hosting you, and I hope you are really enjoying your visit and getting a lot out of it. I wish I were there to be hanging out with you, but we're out here in Las Vegas and this weekend in Pahrump, Nevada, sharing the tools with another group of people here. So, David.
Michael? Yeah. Along that line, it's great. I was just sharing with the ladies that out of my 4 years here and over 40 some odd people that have lived here in my tenure, and not counting the people that have come to the intensive, these two young ladies are the most opening and willing and receptive to this information that I've met. And
awesome.
That they expressed, and I love the honesty and truthfulness about, well, how many worksheets have you done? And, well, we haven't done any. And they are just really fabulous. They're bringing a great energy. And Nightshade, even I mean, they're willing. The big key to it is the willingness. She called her mother today, and just to tell her mother that she loved her. And they connected, I think, in a pretty special way. And I don't know if Nightshade wants to share any of it or not, that now the space has been opened up for her mother and possibly her father to come here to Heartland for the intensive and are part of the intensive.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, Nightshade, do you have anything to share about that?
I'm very excited to bring these tools to people in my life to help me too. I think it's going to be great for them. I'm glad that this place exists. I don't know how we found it, but we did.
Well, we're delighted. Amazing what a little Ryce Hall will do, eh?
Right? Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can just share briefly with our audience what connected us in the first place. And the two ladies that are speaking are from a community called Acorn, and they're looking at alternative building materials. And one of the things we've been experimenting with at Heartland is building with Ryce Halls. And Ryce Halls are normally globally a landfill product, and it's an awesome building material because rice growing in water has pretty much got the moisture thing handled and the bug thing handled. So Ryce Halls are impervious to mold, to mildew, to bugs, to water. I mean, they're just an awesome product and are abundantly available. And if you fill a sandbag with Ryce Halls, it weighs less than a pound. And you can build a building out of it using steel. Actually, we're probably going to change that to a product called basalt rebar. And you simply stake through the bags, and then once you've built your building, which costs next to nothing, you then put a masonry covering on it, some sort of an external and internal coating. Of course, there are a variety of ways to do that, and you have yourself a building. So the ladies were down visiting and looking at what we're working toward with Ryce Halls, and what we're holding the vision for is that we will get this down to a perfected science of building rice hull buildings and then taking it out, especially to third world countries where they consume a lot of rice, but for some reason have never thought of building buildings with it. So people are living in tin huts. You go to India and there's so much rice, and anybody who's been to India, you've seen the tin shacks. They're poor insulation, hot in the summer and cold in the winter, and the tin roofs, tin buildings, just because that's what they can scavenge. But the rice hulls, they could be building actual homes that would be cool in the summer and warm in the winter. So that's part of our vision at Heartland, and just one aspect of what we're doing. So we're delighted that you're both there, and we hope that everything that we're doing can be of support to you.
Thanks for having us.
Delighted. Jeannie, do we have any questions in the chat room yet, or anybody else phoning in?
No, don't have anything yet.
Okay. Terry, with what you've been processing, do you have any comments, questions? It sounds like you're opening some new spaces in you. Anything to share, or questions, comments?
What I really was wanting to ask you was a review, if there are no other questions or directions there, a review of the power person dynamic. I would like to hear that again.
Oh, yeah, that's a fun one. All right, well, that's a great question, and that'd be a good topic for the show, the power person dynamic. And the power person dynamic we go over in our workshop, CoDependence to Interdependence, when we travel. And, of course, we actually have a 9-day intensive based in CoDependence to Interdependence each summer at Heartland. And there is a DVD, a 2-hour DVD available on that workshop. But basically what we're looking at in the codependence realm is that when we're blaming somebody else for what we're feeling, again, you made me angry, you made me sad, you made me afraid, we're copying what we call a power person dynamic. And we're saying that somebody else could possibly cause my mind to output something, and therefore it must be their fault. Now, certainly somebody can come along, and if you have some form of hostility or fear in you, it's been called pushing your buttons. They can certainly push that button. They can certainly resonate that in you, but they can't cause that in you. If somebody resonates that hostility or fear in you, then you have a choice. You can forgive it. You can actually delve inside yourself and remove what never belonged and be free of it, or you can keep blaming them and go on and keep doing the same old why is this happening to me again. Actually, it's kind of fun. On occasion, we'll have people who will call Heartland looking for my book, and you can tell what's going on in their life by the title they give the book. And we hear titles like, why are they doing this to me again? Why am I doing this to myself again? But basically what we're saying is, if you imagine holding a newborn child, and you were to describe the essence of that child in one word, its descriptor, and I'm saying this based on tens of thousands of people we've asked over the years this question, your descriptor would be some variation on the theme of love. Our thesis is that's what we come in as. That's what we human beings are. When we come in as love and run into a power person that isn't functioning as love, what tends to happen is the hostilities and fears of the power person are genetically structured in us, usually because the power person is usually a parent. Not 100% of the time, but usually the primary power person is a parent. By the way, normally we have more than one power person. We'll tell you in a little bit how to determine. And if I miss that point, please remind me, David or Terry, to go over how you determine who your primary power person is. But if you experience a caretaker, that is somebody who's got more power over your life than you do, as not functioning out of their being, out of love, which they're designed to function out of, then because your genetics are the same with the same hostilities and fears, there will tend to be messages of hostility or fear energetically and or verbally, emotionally, and sometimes physically sent to the child. And what happens is the child starts to build in its mind a file, so to speak, based in those messages of hostility and fear. So they might be messages, common ones we hear from people is, well, my dad always told me I was stupid. My mom always told me I would never amount to anything. My mom used to beat on me and tell me how worthless I was, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those kinds of messages we build into the storage system called the mind. And there comes a point as the child grows and develops where those errant messages coagulate, solidify, as it were, into an image in our mind, a body that we think we are. So attached to our idea of ourselves are these errant messages from the power person of how stupid or useless or hopeless or how always in trouble or how will always be a failure or how you always disappoint or how, all those kinds of things. And this forms an image in the mind of the child of self. Once this self starts to solidify and form, the tendency then is the being, who we are, love, gives up the direct experience of who it is to fall into identification with this non-being self. So we have a being made in love, that is love, absolutely, positively. We're all made of exactly the same stuff. And then we have an image in our mind of this non-being that we come to identify with. So if I was told, as a kid, I'm a useless bum, stupid, will never make it, if I buy into that as my identity and I give up my direct experience of love for that identity, I will be in such rage. Why? Such rage because in order to, what I believe do was survive, I gave up the direct experience of love. I gave up my identity for a false identity. And so most people by the age of 3 or 4 have fallen into that trap, and in their own minds they become the picture projected out of those false messages, and so are effectively dead. The being is now dead in terms of any kind of true function. And this person tends then to create experiences out of these non-being messages, out of this non-being state. By the way, in the ancient teachings, for those who want to recover their lives, you might remember that it was said, in order for you to live, you've got to die. Which, that doesn't make any sense. But when you start looking from this power person point of view, it makes perfect sense. In order for you to go back to being your true nature, the non-being self has to go. That means that the messages based in hostility, fear, rage, grief, pain, and trauma have to be forgiven. They have to be removed. And so the Aramaic idea of forgiveness is how you go inside yourself and remove what never belonged. All those messages from all the generations ultimately have to be removed. Now, there's a challenge to doing that. And the challenge is that we live in a culture that teaches us we're not responsible for what's going on inside of us. Somebody else is, which means virtually everyone lives in denial. Anyone who's ever said to someone else, you made me angry, you made me sad, you made me afraid, is now in denial. And what happens when we enter into denial is that we then dissociate from a part of our own minds. We create this separated, dissociated part of the mind filled with content of all of the painful messages we want to dissociate from. That content, when we dissociate from it, when we walk into that pain, that content with its feelings, its thoughts, its behaviors, we are locked out of. We have no ability to change it. So let's say we had a raging power person. When the stress is up and the chips are down, what we're going to do is turn to those behaviors of rage, and we're going to rage. And we'll say to ourselves, well, I'm never going to rage like that again. And, of course, people are serious when they say I'm never going to rage like that again. But because that dynamic is in the dissociated mind, it is unreachable and unchangeable. You can do all the critical thinking you want about the rage. You can tell yourself how terrible it is that you rage. You can tell yourself how you never want to rage again and you're going to do a new behavior you're going to love. And that means nothing to the dissociated mind. It does not change one iota of information in the dissociated mind. The dissociated mind comes into play depending on stress. And so there are three levels of behavior. Once one is living out of the dissociated mind, once that dissociated mind runs one's behavior, there are only three behaviors possible for that person. And those three behaviors are this. One, and it's all related to stress. When there's no stress, that person will do whatever they did to get along with their power person. Automatic decision system in this body-mind unit will guide them to do what they did to get along with their power person. So if a person was, let's say, mousy with their power person, and that was what they did to get along, then that person will just naturally be mousy. If that person was aggressive and loud and mean, then that person will go into aggressive, loud, and mean behavior whenever there's no stress. When stress starts to build, there'll be a shift in behavior, and one will shift into what they did to resist and survive with their power person. So let's say, for example, if a person, what they would do when the stress went up with their power person was they would disappear and shut up. Then the person who perhaps in their normal state was kind of loud and aggressive, all of a sudden will disappear. They'll shut up. They'll just, kind of evaporate from the scene. If the way that a person got along with or dealt with their power person in terms of how they resisted and survived with their power person was to rage, then they'll go into rage. So that's second stage behavior. Third stage behavior is when one becomes ultra-stressed. And because the ultra-stressed behaviors of the power person are stored in the dissociated mind, what will happen when a person becomes ultra-stressed is they'll do whatever their power person did that they hated the most. That will take over their minds, and whatever it is, if the power person became rageful and physically abusive, then this person will tend to move into rage and physical abuse. I remember talking with a fellow a few months back, and he was saying, well, my father was just the most brutal man. I mean, he beat me within an inch of my life 1,000 times in my life. And he said, and I've never done that with my children. He said, I was determined I was going to do it differently. And I said back to him, well, I hear that. So you're able to change the behavior. But how many times did you have to fight the inclination to become overtly physically abusive and rageful with your children? And his children were grown. This man was in his 60s. He's like, I still have to do that. I said, I rest my case. Maybe you didn't play it out, but that's what your mind prompted you to do. You made a commitment to do something different, but forgiveness allows you to go in and remove those behaviors. That's the whole idea of the ancient Aramaic work of forgiveness. And the way that you tell who your key power person is, and I'll just put this idea out and then we'll open to questions or thoughts. The way you tell who your key power person is, because we tend to have more than one, is whose behavior do you do when you're ultra-stressed? That'll be your core and key power person. So if you had somebody that was rageful and physically abusive, then when the stress is up and the chips are down, when you become ultra-stressed, if you want to go into rage and become physically abusive, that points to that's your key power person. And that would be the person in your life who you'd likely have to do 77 times 70 worksheets on. When they asked the original teacher of this forgiveness process that we're using, how many of these worksheets do we have to do? How many times do we need to forgive? Is 7 enough? His answer in Aramaic was 77 times 70. You will do an infinite number of forgiveness processes around that dynamic in yourself until you're finished with it. And It's not Dr. Feelgood, and many people say, well, gee, that sounds like a lot of work. It's like, no, resisting and fighting against rage and physical abuse is a lot of work, and living with that inside of you is a lot of work, but it's effortless. Your power person dynamics, in order to do the behaviors that your power person did, it is absolutely effortless to do that. It takes effort to move in a different direction. It takes work. And what Yeshua said 2,000 years ago was, you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother. Now, from the Greek, that sounded kind of like a bleeding heart statement. You forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother. That's not what he was saying. In the Aramaic language, the word heart is the unconscious. And what was being said was, you must remove from your unconscious that which you're blaming somebody else for. And when you remove it, that will no longer run your behavior. Yes, it takes work. And it's not Dr. Feelgood because you have to go back through and deal with those things. But to truly live, you've got to die. That non-being self has to go. And that's kind of the crux. Great question, Terry. That's the crux of the power person dynamic and the behaviors based in the power person and the dissociated mind. As long as we are in denial about something that's inside of us, how do you tell if something's inside of you? Are you feeling it? That's all you need to know. Your mind may be showing you a picture that it's about somebody else. If you're feeling it, it's yours. And until you can go inside yourself and collapse those things and remove them, what will govern your life will be the power person dynamic. So does that leave anyone there with any comments or questions, or anybody phoning in, Jeannie, or anybody in the chat room that has a question?
Nobody has their hand up, and there's no question in the chat room, but I have just a couple of, I guess, comments or questions.
Please.
One being, if everybody would go to our website, www.whyagain, that's WHYAGAIN.com, whyagain.com, and click on the download worksheets. There's a codependence worksheet out there. And so my first part is, so why are we codependent with people? We need them to act a certain way so that whatever is in us based on our power person or whatever, that will come up for us to heal? Or what's the purpose of us being codependent with someone else? Why do we do that to ourselves? That's the first part. So if you want to go there first, and then I have a second one.
Go ahead. Go for it, sweetie.
Well, go ahead and address that first.
Oh, why do we play the codependence game? I didn't realize you were asking me a question. I thought you were asking the audience a question.
I just thought that would be a good thing to explain to people why we do that.
Sure. Yeah, well, when we're in the blame game, first of all, we give away our power, and we pretend that somebody else creates what happens inside of us. Nobody can create anything happening inside of you, but people can come along and resonate or fire what's happening inside of you. If I say, don't think about the color of your car, what happens? People say, well, I'm thinking about the color of my car. Well, actually, you're not thinking about the color of your car. All that's happening is the brain cells, the information contained in the brain cells about the color of your car are firing, and those brain cells, when they fire, bring information forward. That's got nothing to do with thinking. It's just a pure resonance process, and that's why anybody can bring up your dissociated mind that taps into whatever's in you. They can resonate that in you. And what takes place is that because we don't want to face that directly, because we don't want to deal with that, and we do that because we're following the pattern of our power person. Notice if your power person lived in blame, somebody else, and of course, oftentimes you were the object of attention of the power person. And so, the blame is always on the child. Well, the child will grow up. If they never resolve that dynamic, then they'll play the same blame game. And they'll follow exactly the dynamic of the power person. You made me angry. They've always got somebody else to blame. And what happens is you give away your power, but you get to look like an innocent victim. Our offering in this work is there are no innocent victims. There are only volunteers. And the way we volunteer is to play out whatever it is in our minds that we haven't dealt with. And literally on an energetic level, we will draw people to play those dynamics out with us. One of the things I talk about in the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop is the work I got to do about 30 years ago with a gentleman named Marcel Vogel, who was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. Marcel had the instrumentation in the laboratory with which to take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. Literally, if we hold an energetic dynamic, especially one filled with some form of rage or fear or pain or turmoil, that energy, when it moves in us, literally, motion sets up fields, sets up a measurable energy field, and that's the energy field that will tend to draw somebody to do it to us again. And so in order to maintain our innocent victim status, we enter into blame, and that means codependence. By the way, one of the other things, the reason why codependence work and addiction work tend to go hand in hand is because anyone who lives in codependence never is able to remove the stresses that are causing their pain. And if you have no relief from stress, what will tend to happen is sooner or later people will go into some form of addictive behavior to anesthetize themselves against the unrelievable strain and stress that they're blaming other people for. Once you come out of blame, you take responsibility for your internal stresses, then you can start to remove your internal stresses. You don't need an anesthetic. But sooner or later, somebody who plays the blame game, the innocent victim game, has to find some form of anesthetic to anesthetize themselves, to get some relief, at least for a little while, from their unresolvable pain.
And so anger can also be that, right?
Say again?
Anger is one of the big anesthetics that we use to cover our pain?
Yeah, I would offer that hostility is the drug of choice for most people on the planet. It is the most common drug on planet Earth. And it's a difficult drug to break free from. Hostility is the fastest way to go into codependent relationship. And the person that one points their hostility at is a person that they're hoping will change their mind, and the person that they're blaming for what's going on in their mind. And, of course, that person can't change your mind, and that person can't cause anything to happen in your mind that isn't already there. And when you take responsibility and start to move it out, then the dynamics start to change. And hostility can be one of the most difficult drugs on the planet to break free from, reason being because it's free and the supplier's internal. You can't just say, okay, I'm not going to the liquor store today. It's a free drug, and it takes a great deal of commitment to move out of the status of being an hostility addict. Most common drug on the planet.
Okay, there's a question in the...
Does that address what you had in mind with your question, sweetie?
Yes, it does. And there is a question in the chat room, so we'll do it first, and then we'll go to my second part question. And so the question in the chat room is, can you explain what does codependence mean?
Mm-hmm. I sure can. We actually just described it in about 10 minutes or less there. Codependence is a game we play whenever I want to blame you for the output of my mind. The pretense that you can cause something to happen inside of me means I'm now codependent with you. And in order to keep from facing and feeling and dealing with my pain directly, I need you to be my codependent. I need you to blame what I'm feeling on. So codependence, really simple. Whenever I'm blaming somebody else for the content of my mind, for what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing, I'm in codependence. And I do that in order not to have to feel and deal with it directly. Now, it's a pretty bizarre and insane solution to life because the person who lives in codependence still gets to feel all the drama and trauma and pain. They have no resolution, but they have the comfort of pretending that it's all somebody else's fault. Once again, one of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines is, you'll notice if you've been through a particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the one that was there every time. The output of your mind is about you. It's yours. It's not about anybody else. Now, we've developed a test in this work for determining whether or not a reality or a feeling that you're having, that you're experiencing, is yours or not. It's a very, very complex test, but it can be learned and applied. And here's the test. How do I tell if something I'm feeling is mine or not? Am I feeling it? That's all you need to know. If you're feeling it, you know that it's an energy in your structure. If you deny ownership of that, you will dissociate from that part of your mind. When you dissociate, whenever somebody comes along and resonates that part of your mind, I talked about don't think about the color of your car fires those brain cells. If there's something painful you've dissociated from, somebody's going to show up because you're continuously sending a signal, inviting someone to bounce off of it. And when they show up and bounce off of that part of your mind, what happens is, because you've dissociated from those brain cells, you don't get to see their content directly. What your mind does is it makes up pictures out of those brain cells of the person who's resonating the brain cells. So they show up in your mind with your problem attached, and then you get to pretend that it's their problem. Once again, how do you tell whether or not a pain you're experiencing is yours or not? Are you experiencing it? If you are, it belongs to you. And, one of my other favorite questions to ask is, people who play the blame game and the denial game, it's all your fault. You made me feel this. You. It's all everybody else. And you really have a problem. Well, that's my next tongue-in-cheek question I love to ask, and that is, if they're the one with the problem, why are you the one with the pain? Obviously, if they were the one with the problem, they'd be going, ouch, this hurts. I have turmoil. I have pain. Notice, it doesn't affect them. It's not their problem. It's your problem. But the mind is so skilled when we deny and dissociate at pretending that what's going on in us is somebody else's fault. It actually builds pictures. We actually see how this other person is responsible. And that's all a fraud. If you're feeling it, it's yours. Get about doing the forgiveness process. Janie described earlier going to www.whyagain.com. On the right-hand side, download worksheets. Download the first two links. The first one explains the forgiveness process, and that's how to crack the dissociated mind. The second one, the first one's the instructions for the second link, which is the actual worksheet process. Start to do that and watch how the changes happen. It's awesome. And fun. Okay. So did that get our question in the chat room? Is there any other refinements on that?
I think that handled that. The other thing then is, how do we break out of being codependent? Just we have to accept the responsibility that, I'm feeling pain, and so it's mine, and then I handle it. I do forgiveness work on it, and I'm done with it. And then I can go and possibly, if it's necessary, hold the other person accountable because their behavior may have been off base as well, but the pain that I'm feeling about their action is mine. So then I would be interdependent with them?
Yeah, well, there are several steps that we go into in the Codependence to Interdependence workshop, but there are several things that when you start to move in that direction will take you into interdependent relationship. I'll often hear people who, because in many circles where they do codependence work, there are no real tools for breaking through it. I'll hear people say, well, I just stay away from relationships because I'm a codependent. It's like, that's codependent. Stop it. What you want to do is enter into your relationships in a new way with new skills, and they are interdependent skills. And if you download that worksheet that Jeannie talked about on the codependence, you'll see 5 columns. In the first column, we ask you to make a list of everybody who's ever offended you. Yes, we realize there may not be enough paper on the planet in some cases, but make a list, and then the nature of their offense, what is it they did, what's your punishment thought, and then what's your advice to them. And so once you've filled those 4 columns out, then, and be specific. And advice, telling somebody to go to hell is not advice. That's punishment. What's your advice? Well, gee, I'd like you to speak to me lovingly, gently, respectfully might be advice in a case where someone's being verbally abusive. And so then the turnaround, the 5th column in that worksheet is we invite you, if you've downloaded that, to title the 5th column, or if you haven't downloaded it yet but you're going to, then make a note. The 5th column we want you to title, how I'm going to follow my advice to them in my life. And we go into a fairly elaborate explanation in the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop. It's showing how we deny, dissociate from something. We build pictures of others who are the problem. And the person who shows up in our mind as the problem is not actually out there in the world. They're in here in our own brain cell structure. And so when you start following your advice to them, when we give advice to others, what we're doing is we're telling them what we need to do. We're giving that advice in order to try to get past our own denial system and to see the part of our mind that we need to change and heal. And so the fifth column, when you start filling in how you're going to follow your advice to them in your life, you find that you're an absolute genius at giving advice if you start following it. As long as you're just giving it to everybody else but not following it, then you tend to build up more and more and more codependent dynamics. And so that's the turnaround that happens in the codependence to interdependence worksheet.
Okay, back to what I started to say first, when I did, just FYI for those that will do this worksheet, this codependence worksheet, one of the things that I found is a lot of my advice was, I wanted them to be honest with me, or I wanted them to trust me, or I wanted them to, have some faith in me. And then when I turned that around to my advice to myself was that I didn't have faith in myself, and I didn't trust myself, and I wasn't honest with myself. So those were, I think, very powerful, more so than in my personal situation. If I said, I want you to speak to me nicely, I don't know that I didn't speak to myself nicely, but when it came to not being fair with myself, or putting myself down or thinking I wasn't worthy or whatever, then that really came home to roost on that.
And, of course, putting yourself down is one of those ways of not being very nice to yourself. You go back to the original idea of law, which had nothing to do with the rule of a superior. It was just, here's how the eternal forces work. The requirement was that you keep love, that is a human life, present in your mind when you think of yourself. And, one who does that would never put themselves down, would never self-deprecate, would never say how, unworthy they are, et cetera, et cetera. And sadly, in some of the in religious circumstances, oftentimes, in order to keep people from, to keep people from becoming egotistical, there's been that, just, keep putting yourself down. And that's not in accord with the law. That's totally against the law. That the eternal forces, to operate truly and fairly in you, you have to be a space of love for yourself and see yourself truly and honestly. Putting yourself lower than someone else will never serve and is totally out of harmony with the way the eternal forces work at their optimum. So I'm glad that you are the space of love for you, sweetie, and me too.
I'm learning. So that takes us back.
We all are.
That takes us back to the other question that I said I had, and it's in reference to where we were talking about the 3 characteristics of stress. And so there was a few comments in the chat room about it, and so I kind of gave the example that when there's no stress and we do what we did to get along, like for me it was to be a good little girl and do what was expected of me. And then when stress arises, then we would go into resistance, and that would be part of what one of my power persons did, and that would be to get quiet. But then high level of stress, we do what they did that we hated the most, and that could be either raging or leaving. And most of the time for me it's leaving, but occasionally there might be a little rage. I'm confessing out here to the radio public. But anyway, I don't recall a power person, one of my parents anyway, that ever raged. Can we switch power people along their lifetime?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so sometimes, just just as a clue there, sometimes a power person in rage isn't yelling and screaming the way the classic, outrageous power person is, but sometimes the raging power person is a strong, stony silence and a look and a put down that comes from that state of rage that isn't the overt kind of rage.
And so it could still come from the same power person, just being expressed differently?
Yeah, there are many different ways of expressing rage. The silent rage that just takes one word in order to cut somebody's throat, is all it takes. Oftentimes on the part of a parent, the parent who, they would never overtly rage at anybody, but they could turn and with a look and a tone of voice and the turn of a word could slice somebody in half. That's rage. But it's not the classic overt, yelling and screaming kind of rage. But is rage just the same?
Michael.
Yes, sir.
That opened up a file on me that the ultimate, when you got into discussion about the ultimate punishment or power person behavior, which was one that I experienced, is where they leave.
Yeah.
And how that's connected to death and dying.
Yeah, leaving is the key issue, one of the biggest issues on the planet, and I would offer that dying is leaving. If you go back into the ancient teachings where they understood the physics of life in the Aramaic, they said with man, death began. We made the process up, and death is the ultimate form of leaving. So leaving is the key power person issue on the planet. If you notice, everybody in your bloodline that's over 120 is gone, and maybe it's time for us to undo that one and reverse it, go back to actually being here present with each other. Are you breathing, Terry?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, sitting here breathing.
Good. Awesome. Go ahead, Jeannie.
I was just going to say, so if there's any questions on any of this, we do have a question in the chat room. We've got about 10 minutes. So 607, you are on the air. Who do we have and where are you calling from?
Hello, it's Richard. Hi, Michael and Terry.
Hey there, young man. Where are you now in the world?
I'm driving on 80 East in Indiana right now.
Oh, okay. Well, Indiana's probably a little wet and chilly right now, is it?
What's that?
I say Indiana's probably a little chilly and wet right now, right?
Yeah, it's raining here right now, or sprinkling anyway. So I just wanted to comment on your talk about, feeling the pain and all that stuff. I was at a workshop over the weekend, and, there's a lot of unforgiving having happened in that group. And I was at the point where it was bringing up a lot of stuff for me, probably from my childhood. And at the end of the one meetings, I just had this pain inside me, and I just said, I need to go sleep. I was tired, and I just had this painful feeling inside myself. And, I'm realizing what you're saying is that's the pain that you're feeling, but I'm projecting it out there into that group of beings out there who are, whether they're experiencing pain or not, I don't know, but the projection is that they haven't forgiven each other either.
Right. Well, then, and a couple of thoughts that I'd offer is one of the last things you ever want to do is forgive anybody for anything. One of the last things you ever want to do is forgive yourself for anything. But if you're in pain, forgiveness is applying that pain to your own internal dynamics in order to remove or alleviate that pain. Then the next question in the context of our conversation that I would ask is, what did your power person do when the stress was up and the chips were down? I bet they went unconscious and left. From what you just described, what you're telling me is when you became ultra stressed, you went unconscious, you wanted to go to sleep, you wanted to leave, and I would bet that's what a power person in your life did. Would that be accurate?
That's probably, that's what I did. I mean, the group wanted to continue on, but I had this feeling of wanting to be asleep and this painful feeling inside, and left the group and went to bed.
But my question,
I just felt I was late at night, and I just felt I was just exhausted and needed sleep. But that was my feeling.
But my question here is just to look back, and this can help to get to the source of that dynamic. If you look back in your life, your early childhood, when the stress was up and the chips were down, did you have probably a parent who would just go to sleep, go unconscious, leave? In that same way? Okay, well, that would probably be something worth doing a worksheet or two on, because what you'll find is that's what tends to govern behavior when the stress is up and the chips are down. David was and both David and Terry actually were at an intensive we did several years ago about 4 years ago, I think, in Florida. And we had about 25 people, and we're about 4 or 5 days into the workshop, and people have partnered up in order to do energy field work and such, and work with the tools. And there was a particular lady there who all of a sudden decided she didn't like her partner, and she wanted to be with another partner. And she wanted that partner to, break up the relationship that they'd established, as part of the intensive with the partner they were working with. And that person said, no, I really don't want to do that. And she just went into a fit of rage. I mean, she was everybody was blown away by it. And once we worked through that and processed through that, the next morning we sat down to process that issue. And, the workshop was codependence, so we started to look at this codependent issue. And we had each person recite, well, what did your power person do when the stress was up and the chips are down? And they went, oh, my God, that's what I did when that happened. Oh, my God, we went through the whole room. And there was one person who said, well, I didn't do what my power person used to do. I just, said, you guys do what you're doing. I'm going to take my partner and go in the other room and go to work on them. We were getting ready to do an exercise, some energy field work, and they were, well, I'm just going to go in the other room and work with them. And I said, well, take a breath as you look at that. I notice you're holding your breath. Oh, yeah, I am. Okay. When you were a kid and the stress was up and the chips are down, what did your power person do? Oh, my God, they went to work. They did exactly. I mean, when carbon-based memory's running the game, we do exactly what our power person did that we hated the most. And so as you look into that, it's a way to start to crack that internal dynamic and wake up on another level to new behaviors and new possibilities. So that'd probably be a good one to look at, Richard. Cool.
Thanks.
Absolutely delighted. Glad to be on the team. Glad you're listening in, and hope you're enjoying your journey, and it's a safe journey.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
Okay, blessings. Thanks for the call in. Jeannie, any other callers or questions in the chat room?
We just have one question in the chat room, and is in a few words, because we've only got like 5 minutes. Can you explain a little better what a power person is? You said it's usually a parent, but can you describe that a little bit better?
Well, I'm not sure I can describe it better, but I can describe it again so that you help build the brain cells. A power person is someone who has more power over our lives at some point than we do. And that power person is not functioning out of a human life, out of being. They're functioning out of some form of hostility or fear. They're the only two conditions required in order for someone to be defined in the context of this work as a power person. Do they have more power over your life than you did? So a child that's 3 years of age, a parent, it's survival. If they don't obey, the parent wants the child to, obey with no questioning, no conversation, no reasoning process, and is willing to rage on the child. So the parent in that case is not functioning out of love, out of a human life. The child perceives the raging parent as a threat to survival, and so it takes on the energetic dynamics of the power person and stores it in the body-mind unit as information for future recall. And it's what will tend to run our lives forevermore until we awaken from and change that power person dynamic. Is that whoever's asking the question? Does that answer cut it?
Okay, we have a dog outside that's barking here. Dr. Tim wrote on the chat room that the power person is a developmental process when we are young that gets reactivated when we're adults. But this person is also asking about friends and people that are in their life now. And I think, kind of like how I asked, could we change power persons? A lot of times when people maybe marry a very powerful person and they feel like, that person has control over them, sometimes it could be friends, couldn't it? And or bosses, different people. I know when people join the service, like join the Army or whatever, then usually their sergeants or whatever become their power people. So it could be anybody in their life, not just a parent, who we feel they have control over us and we have to do what they say or we won't survive. Could that be accurate?
Absolutely, yes. Again, the only two things required are this person has more control over our lives than we do. A person could be 90 and be under the care and control of someone else, and if that person isn't functioning out of love, that person will become a power person. Every cult has as its objective to get people to switch power persons. And by the way, the largest cult on the planet is the military. All over the world, the military uses certainly less than love, every form of hostility and fear they can, in order to force somebody into behaviors they want. You want to watch the movie Straight Metal Jacket. It's either Straight Metal Jacket or Full Metal Jacket, and you get to see exactly the power person dynamic and how it gets turned around. But yeah, only those two conditions, and it can happen. Again, we tend to have multiple power persons, but the way you tell who your primary is whose behavior to do when the stress is up and the chips are down. And so we're down to about 60 seconds, Jeannie. Any final questions or comments in the chat room?
No.
Maybe we'll continue this discussion tomorrow. This seems like it's opening some good stuff. We'd invite everybody to let people know tomorrow. We'll do some more conversation about power person dynamics and the healing of those power person dynamics.
I think that would be a very good idea. There's some other conversations going on that they said they wish the show was longer than an hour. So I think doing this again tomorrow would be great.
Cool. Well, what we'll invite you to do, those who are in the chat room who haven't called in, our calling number is 646-200-4169. Call in tomorrow, open with your question on power person dynamics and codependence. And we'll take it into that realm. And our space we're holding for you is that this is the opening of the best year yet of your eternal life. Blessings.